Hello everybody, Mark here with another beginner chess review game. I've had some feedback from my other couple of games that I've posted that they're a bit too long and intricate for beginner analysis. So in this one, I'm going to really just cover the most basic ideas, not go too deep in any sidelines or anything like that, and just kind of show the main themes of the game, and basically just show the game and talk about it. So my friend Antony's playing this game on chess.com. Rated less than 1,000, so they're both relative beginners. So expect a few mistakes, but that's fine. Antony started with d4, and his opponent responded with d5, knight c3, knight f6, e3. One idea, Antony, is to develop your bishop out before you play e3, just so that it's developed outside the pawn chain. Otherwise, these dark squares will often keep your bishop hemmed in and not very active. That's just a small thing. e3, knight c6, pinning the knight, that's a good move. Bishop g4, attacking your own queen. f3 is not terrible. I would just suggest playing knight to f3 though. You can always kick the bishop later, so it's not going to be that big of a deal if he pins you. Also, maybe even just knight to e2. F3 is just a little bit committal, and it makes your pawn structure a little bit weak with this pawn on e3 having no defense if the center ever opens up. So F3, bishop e6, this is not the greatest move by black. He probably should have just gone to d7 to break this pin, and also to let his e5 pawn move, his e pawn move to e5 if needed. Knight gd2, a6, kicking our bishop. Bishop a4, keeping that pin and forcing black to compromise his pawn structure a little bit. Bishop b3, knight a5, and we're losing our bishop anyway. So Antony made the right decision and ignored the threat of losing his bishop for the knight, and played knight f4, developing his other piece to a more active post, which is a good move. Knight takes b3. C takes b3 is not really the way you want to recapture. You definitely want to be recapturing with your a pawn in this position. It's a lot. You want to keep as many pawns in the center as you can, and a general rule of thumb is always capture towards the center. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. Now your rook's basically developed already, and if this queen ever comes to say d6, you've got ideas of knight taking b5 tactically working because of this pin on the a file, for example. Not saying that's going to happen, but it's just an idea. C takes b3 was played though. b4, kicking our knight, which is not the greatest idea in the world, because our knight, because these b5 and d5 pawn moves have been played, c5 is now an outpost. An outpost is a square where you can place a piece which it can't be dislodged by an enemy pawn. So once he plays, so this is fine right now, this outpost. It's pretty tough for white to get to it. He's got to play something along the lines of knight e2, knight c1, knight d3, and then knight c5. So it's going to take quite a while to get there, but as soon as black plays b4 here, it's a positional blunder, as it allows knight a4, and wherever the queen moves, now we've got knight c5. Very good positional play by Antony, and he's got a nice advantage right now. Queen c6, and Antony, unprovoked, plays knight c to d3. I don't think this is the best idea. You've got a great knight on c5 right now, and there's no real reason to move it. This knight isn't going to be kicked by this bishop anytime soon because of this misplacement of this bishop. And also, you've got simple development. You've got bishop d2 winning a tempo on the b4 pawn. You've got your rook coming to c1, and you've got all sorts of discovered attacks against the black queen. So don't move that knight. That knight is really well placed. And yes, if ever, I don't know, it's challenged like this with knight d7, well then you can just play knight d3, and you're reinforcing it like this. So they're just some positional ideas to consider. You played your knight to c5 for a reason. Doesn't need to be on d3. a5 was played, defending that b4 pawn in advance. a3, not a bad move at all, just trying to break up the pawn structure, and that's fine. Bishop f5. Now again, I would have played perhaps back here before playing a3. Before playing a3, I would consider taking this bishop on e6. Well, actually, a move before. Another reason why the knight moving back from... I'll just remove these lines because they're a bit of a pain. Excuse me one moment. So one benefit of having your knight on c5 is that after you take... I'll just put this variation on the board. After you take here, the queen can't recapture, so the e-pawn is forced to take. And now this pawn structure is just awful for black. Now you can think about playing your knight, rerouting your knight to e5 where it can't be kicked as well, and this is a much better square. It attacks the queen, the c file will be open. It's a half open file with one pawn on it, so you can play your rook to c1 and white will have a fantastic game. Once you let, in this position, once you let the bishop get away, black's got simple play now. He's got e6 and he's just got bishop to d6 and he's okay now. Again, you've lost a bit of your advantage. So that's just something to consider. e4, not a good move. You're basically giving up a pawn here and giving black a huge initiative. This is actually a blunder. If you'll notice, he has 1, 2, 3, and 4 pieces defending or attacking that pawn. So when you move it, it's not really threatening much, and you've only got one defender on it. So not a good move. D takes e4, F takes e4, and queen takes check. King d2. And then bishop g4 was played, attacking our queen. One idea here, rook e1 was played, which I think is a relatively good move, trading queens in this position. When you're defending, a common theme is to remove as many attackers as possible, and just to lighten the pressure that is on you. Another idea could have been queen c2 rather than rook e1, just getting out of the attack and then playing rook e1 later, such as, for example, g5 attacking our knight, rook e1, queen retreats, and then we attack the queen again. And then we've just relocated our knights, and this position's fine for white, I think. Anyway, after rook e1, queen takes d4 was played, queen c2, and black makes a very large blunder. Black goes all greedy and gobbles up some delicious rook on a1. However, the rook turns out to be poisoned. After Antony's good continuation of queen c6, check, forking his own rook, king d8, queen takes a8 check, king d7. White has a strong advantage and a really good position right now. Knight c5 check was another good move by Antony. King d6, queen a7, defending the knight. I think there was ideas if you played queen a6 check. This is getting a bit more specific and inside lines, so I won't go on it too long, but I'll show you a sample variation when you sacrifice the knight. If the king takes the knight, you play b4 check, a takes b4, a takes b4. If after a takes b4, if king d4, then queen d3 is checkmate. This rook is doing a great job of controlling all these squares, and the pawn is controlling the only square that the queen can't. Which is a really cool mate in the middle of the board. So anyway, a takes b4, king d4, and queen d3 mate again. And if instead of king d4, king takes b4, there's a mating net of knight d3 check, king b3, queen b5, king a2, queen a4 check, king b1, and then you take your pick, queen c2 mate, and also queen queen c2 mate, or a mate in 2, queen b3, and then when the queen blocks, checkmate. So that's just one idea of sacrificing your knight for a mating attack on the king, which is exposed. And you'll notice in all these variations, black's pieces are over here impotent on the king side, and black's king is basically walked all the way down the board because these pieces can't help in the defense. So anyway, I digress. Queen a7 was played, defending the knight. Nothing wrong with that move. Queen takes a3. Now, obviously, this is just blundering the queen, which I guess was missed, perhaps in time pressure. I'm not 100% sure of the situation vis-a-vis time in the game. However, a different continuation could have been queen a2 check, king c3, e6, just developing pieces, king e7, and this is good for white. I won't go into this. A lot going on in this position. It's very complicated, so I'm not going to go into it in a beginner analysis. Antony, if at this point you would like me to make a video which is more in depth and goes over a lot more lines and tactical motifs in this position, then just ask me, leave a comment or whatever on YouTube. But for now, I'm just going to cover the basics because we're near the end of the game. After queen a7 and queen takes a3, bishop takes a3 and black's down a queen, but he's not going to be able to fight for much longer. Knight e4 check, knight takes e4, another blunder. He's performing the kitchen sink variation, which is a favorite saying by Jerry, the Chess Network, where he throws away all his pieces in an attempt to escape, but it doesn't work. King e5, king e3, a really good move from Antony. I really like this. The king has no squares to go to, except for f5, and he's going to be tracked down very soon. So after king e3, which is a very good move, black played f5, offering no resistance, and queen d4 was checkmate. So there was, it's hard to give basic ideas and feedback without going into sidelines. So I'm sorry if it was a bit complicated or I went too fast, but that's the beauty of videos. You can watch and rewatch, and Antony, you know where to find me. You can ask me any questions, and anyone else, you can ask me questions on YouTube. Hope you enjoyed this beginner breakdown.